Welcome to Elle Speaks. And as usual, I'm a little bit early, but that's better than being a little bit late. This is the first live of the new year. Happy 2026. And tonight, I wanted to discuss the federal complaint against Luigi Nicholas Mangione. Mangione is facing state charges in New York of second degree murder. And after the state charges looms federal charges. So, anybody who's able to join me tonight, welcome. Oh, and thank you to my subscribers and thank you to my new subscribers. And I definitely have an appreciation for people who catch the replay. So, we'll get started here in just a second because I have the federal complaint right here in front of me, or what typically in layman's terms is either called an indictment or a probable cause affidavit. But in the Southern District of New York, it's a federal complaint. And Luigi Mangione is facing four counts. And the four counts that Mangione is facing do make him eligible for the death penalty. Right now, I believe he probably had one of the longest evidentiary hearings in his state case, minimally in the state of New York, possibly in the United States. Went on for at least 3 weeks. The prosecution called over 20 witnesses. One could argue they were being thorough, the state of New York. I think they just gave Mangione's very vigorous defense a lot of fodder, a lot to go through, a lot to poke holes in. But let's talk about the federal case. 4 counts, Southern District of New York, 2 counts of stalking. So the federal government believes that minimally between November 24th, 2024, up through December 4th, 2024, that Mangione planned and executed the crime of murdering the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. The stalking charges come in because the federal government is claiming that Mangione, with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate, and place under surveillance with the intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate another person, Brian Thompson, actually carried out a crime causing serious bodily injury, and in this case, the death of Brian Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th and West 54th Street and 6th Avenue. Now, usually when I think about cameras, CCTV, I usually think about Great Britain, the United Kingdom. But in an area as posh as West 54th Street and 6th Avenue, I'm really not surprised that there were cameras. And these cameras actually captured a lot. Not only that, there was a camera in the hotel that Mangione checked into, and the clerk asked him to remove his mask. Mangione, the entire time he was in New York, allegedly wore a mask, the type that we would see that we became familiar with during COVID. And it's not unusual to see some people still wearing those masks. But the clerk at the hotel asked Mangione to remove his mask, which he did. And I would say, other than that picture in the hotel, that there's Mangione in the hotel. He looks to be in a pretty good mood, friendly. That other than this picture, the picture captured of Mangione in the back seat of the taxi in New York, There he is in the back seat of the taxi. I would say these are actually very, very good photos of Mangione. So there he is again in the hotel. Now, why 2 counts of stalking? Well, travel. So there's interstate commerce, and then there's the use of interstate facilities. Mangione allegedly came into New York. He allegedly came into New York by bus. And I do have a photo that photos that were included in the complaint. This particular photo is also included in the complaint of Mangione behind Brian Thompson wielding a weapon. Now, I don't know how YouTube will feel about me showing that particular photo, but that is allegedly Luigi Mangione right as he was, or right before he shot Brian Thompson. Brian Thompson, that's my dog taking a drink, by the way, if you can hear that. Somebody's thirsty. Brian Thompson, by the way, had been the CEO of United Healthcare for only 4 years. And there was an investors meeting inside of the hotel that day, December 4th. And I got from a very good source that the investors meeting was actually about how much anesthesia to give a patient going under the knife, specifically lowering the amount of anesthesia that a patient would receive in surgery. But instead of us talking about that, what we're talking about now is Luigi Mangione. This photo is also included in the indictment, and that's Mangione on the corner, I would guess, of West of 6th Street or West 54th. And if he is convicted of killing this crime, the federal government has a pretty good case that it was premeditated, because there was an electric bicycle. There was an electric, well, there you go. I censored actually what was in there. There's the 3D gun and another clip, more ammunition. But back to premeditation. Mangione would have gotten this ID, a New Jersey driver's license, stating that his name is Mark Rosario. After committing the crime, he was able to go and pull out an electric bicycle that was allegedly hidden, jump on that electric bicycle, and off he was to his escape. I don't believe, however, that Mangione, that the escape was planned as well as the alleged crime. And I would go even further to say that as a 26-year-old young man who'd already gotten his master's degree, he attended the University of Pennsylvania, graduated sum cum laude, or graduated cum laude. He graduated valedictorian of his high school, gave a speech on artificial intelligence, which will probably all be used against him in court. I would say that leaving a digital footprint, that, creating and printing a 3D weapon, I don't know. I think that probably smarter criminals do it the way that it was done 30 or 40 years ago and buy a weapon right off of the street. I can't see the chat, but all chats have trolls. And if there is a troll in the chat, block and enjoy the show. So back to the federal complaint. So, under the murder of Brian Thompson, so a special agent with the FBI assigned to the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, who says that he was personally involved in this investigation, and that he and other law enforcement officers examined documents obtained through a court authorized search warrant. We know there's an argument over no search warrant in the state case. Found or opened and went through the backpack that was found in Central Park. And that backpack is actually included in the federal complaint. Let me see. I'm sure I have a photo of it here. And I know that there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people who believe that, as the CEO of United Healthcare, I think the fifth largest private healthcare company in the United States, that Mangione is a hero. There he is on the electric bicycle. But I got a problem with shooting a man in the back and then being called a hero. So there's the backpack that was found in Central Park. And when Mangione was arrested in Pennsylvania, there was another backpack with him. But back to the federal complaint. So December 4th, 2024, around 6:45 in the morning, Brian Thompson, who's called the victim in the complaint, was shot and killed by a masked assailant. And Mangione is referred to as the shooter in the complaint. And Brian Thompson was shot and killed while walking on West 54th Street. So security camera video showed the shooter, allegedly married Luigi Mangione, wearing a gray backpack, come from between two parked cars, walked up to the victim, and he shot Brian Thompson allegedly in the leg and in the back outside of the Midtown Hotel entrance on West 54th. And it says that the firearm that the shooter used appeared to have a silencer attached to the front of the barrel. And it does look to me that when you look at the weapon, it does seem to me that there is a silencer attached to this gun. So the complaint includes, photos from the security cameras. So law enforcement, after responding to the scene, they recovered spent 9mm shell casings. There's Mangione's arrest photo. Recovered spent 9mm shell casing and at least one live round of 9mm ammunition. The words deny, delay, and depose were written on the side of some of the shell casings. That's attention to detail. I'll give Mangione that. Those three words, at least two of them, deny and delay, are used apparently by insurance companies. So law enforcement also recovered a cell phone in the vicinity of the location where the shooting had occurred. I think about the private school that Mangione's family sent him to. I think about the support he got, while he was at University of Pennsylvania, a very competitive university to get into, by the way. And I wonder what Mangione's family is going through, knowing that Mangione is possibly facing a death sentence in the federal prosecution. Over the course of the next several days, we know there was a nationwide manhunt, and investigators retrieved and reviewed hundreds of hours of recordings from nearby security cameras to track Mangione's movements, both before and after the murder. Remember, the feds believe that this crime actually began around November 24th and was completed December 4th, 2024. So at around 10:11 p.m., Mangione on November 24th allegedly arrived in New York City on an intercity bus at the Port Authority. He arrived in a bus terminal in Manhattan from Atlanta, Georgia. At least that's where the bus originated from. Sorry, Enzo always has to make an appearance during a live stream. Afterwards, he'll go right to sleep. So Mangione allegedly took a taxi from the Port Authority bus terminal to the area around the Midtown Hotel where the crime would eventually occur. And he stayed in that area, according to the feds, for about an hour. And then Mangione took another taxi to a hostel located located on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And Mangione is doing all of this allegedly under the name Mark Rosario. That's one of the best fake IDs I have ever seen. So when Mangione was checking into the hostel, that's when he was caught on security camera because the desk clerk asked Mangione to remove his mask. And that photo was given to Crime Stoppers. It was distributed everywhere. But other than his interaction with that desk clerk, Mangione kept that mask on even while he was inside of the hostel. So we move to December 4th, 2024. Mangione allegedly left the hostel early that morning while it was still dark and around 5:35 in the morning. And he left that hostel wearing the gray backpack. So There's pretty good surveillance footage of Mangione. And I think it's interesting that the feds say that beginning November 24th, that Mangione was conducting surveillance of his own. So he leaves the hostel around 5:35 a.m., like I said. And that's the photo of Mangione. That's the photo of Mangione with the gray. There's a photo of him with that wearing that gray backpack. So just 6 minutes later, he's captured on camera again at approximately 5:41 in the morning. And he's already in the area of the Midtown Hotel. And Mangione did stop at a nearby coffee shop. It's not even 6 a.m. yet. And I guess even Mangione said he needed a coffee to make it through the day. So then Mangione allegedly returned to a bench around the Midtown Hotel. I would take this as Mangione's allegedly waiting. And at least on one occasion, prior to shooting allegedly Brian Thompson, Mangione is seen using his cell phone. I don't know if he made a call. I don't know if he was looking up directions. Who knows? So now we're around 6:45 in the morning and he's waiting, remember, near the Midtown Hotel for about an hour. He got there around 5:41 in the morning. And Mangione allegedly saw Brian Thompson and approached him. And he shot Thompson multiple times, the leg and in the back. And then Mangione took off running on foot to West 55th Street, where he allegedly got on an electric bicycle and rode towards Central Park. And remember, Central Park is where law enforcement claims that they found a backpack belonging to Mangione. And after disappearing inside the park for a while, it's not specified how long, Mangione is captured again on video leaving Central Park near West 77th Street. And he's riding north on that electric bicycle on Central Park West. He went into Central Park, according to the feds, wearing that gray backpack. But when he left Central Park, he was not wearing the gray backpack. The gray backpack was not with him. The complaint has all of these photos. So now it's about 6:58 in the morning. Remember, he left the hostel, what, 5:35 a.m.? It's an hour and a half later. And security footage captures Mangione riding the electric bike near West 85th Street and Columbus Avenue. 7 a.m., Mangione is captured on video walking near West 86th Street and Columbus Avenue. The electric bicycle, nowhere in sight. 7:04 a.m. He's been moving around for maybe almost 2 hours. Brian Thompson has already been shot and killed. Around 7:04 a.m., that is when the feds alleged that Mangione grabbed a taxi that drove into the George Washington Bridge bus terminal around the area of West 179th Street and Fort Washington Avenue. And there's Mangione in the back seat of the taxi, and his face was captured by a camera in the taxi. So 7:30 a.m. footage from the George Washington bus terminal. I don't know if New York has always had security cameras in bus terminals, but definitely after 9/11. Definitely after 9/11. Hi Susan. Definitely after 9/11, I believe that most, if not all, bus terminals now have cameras. So it's 7:30 a.m. and he's seen on video footage from the George Washington Bridge bus terminal, and he's entering the bus station. And there's no video footage showing Mangione leaving the bus terminal. And the feds claim that this suggests that he left New York City. If he's not seen coming out of the bus terminal, then it is probably reasonable to assume that he got on a bus. Possibly somebody picked him up. So, 2 days later, after the shooting, around December 6th, law enforcement searching Central Park found the gray backpack that Mangione was captured on video wearing. So, December 9th, around 9:14 a.m., it's been 5 days, less than a week since Brian Thompson has been murdered. A worker at the McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, called the cops and said that there was a man at the McDonald's who looked like the man that police were looking for. And that man was later identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione. And of course, he had that really good, what I call a really good fake ID anyway, saying that his name was Mark Rosario. So the Altoona Police Department showed up at the McDonald's and they encountered Mangione, and they believed that he matched the appearance of the guy that was seen on video camera shooting at Brian Thompson. So they approached Mangione. They asked him for ID. Mangione gave them the fake New Jersey ID, saying that his name was Mark Rosario, which is the same ID, I'll remind you, that was used at the hostel. And I remember reading that they asked Mangione, "Have you been to New York recently?" So Mangione had allegedly had a loaded 9 millimeter pistol with a silencer on it, consistent with the weapon that was used to murder Brian Thompson, that was captured on video, clothing that matched the same clothing that the shooter wore in the security camera, and a notebook, several $1,000s in cash, an envelope associated with a bank, a FDIC insured bank, and a letter addressed to the feds that is now known as the feds letter. I've read that letter, at least I'm assuming that all of the letter was published. And I find it interesting that the first thing Mangione writes in the letter is that he did have appreciation for what the feds do. The 9 millimeter and the silencer were later tested, found to be an operable weapon by a ballistics examiner at the New York Police Department. And That 9 millimeter that I showed earlier in this live is the 9 millimeter and the extra clip that Mangione had on him when he was arrested. Now, I would say having several $1,000s in cash, having a fake ID, well, maybe I have to, retract my statement a little bit that Mangione had not planned his getaway very well. Get pretty far with a few $1,000s. The notebook contains several handwritten pages expressing hostility toward wealthy executives of the health insurance industry in particular. So Mangione wasn't concerned with cogs in the wheel, wasn't concerned with the healthcare worker that called people and asked them if they wanted to buy insurance. He wasn't concerned with the insurance agents. But supposedly, that's what was in the notebook. For example, the complaint says the notebook contained the following entries that corresponded to specific dates. And in one entry marked August 15th, 2024, the notebook described how things are finally coming together. And quote, I'm glad in a way that I procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about United Healthcare. The notebook entry also allegedly states that the target is insurance because it checks every box. So this crime committed, right, what, 2 weeks before Christmas, began November 24th, right before Thanksgiving, executed December 4th. Mangione said he'd actually procrastinated. Entry number two, October 22nd, 2024. These are statements in the notebook. 1.5 months. This investor conference is a true windfall. And most importantly, the message becomes self evident. End quote. Now, another entry in the notebook describes an intent to, quote, whack, WACK, the CEO of one of the insurance companies at its investor conference. As important as a CEO is to a corporation, the investors wield a lot of power. Now, I'm not suggesting that Mangione or anybody should kill another person to get their point across, especially a political point, because healthcare has become a political issue in this country. It is a political entry in this country. Thanks for the thumbs up, Susan. But I digress. So October 22nd, 2024, that was about 6 weeks before the murder of Brian Thompson. So this would be considered legally cold and calculated. In other words, premeditated. That gives the shooter a lot of time to reassess this entire plan and to decide not to do it. But we know that's not what happened. So and I mean, how much research did Mangione have to do to know that there was an investor conference at that particular hotel on that particular day? So the Fed's letter that the government claims that it recovered from Mangione stated, quote, I wasn't working with anyone. I remember reading that part. Mangione makes it very clear, or he wants the feds to believe that this was his plot alone. He plotted it by himself, he executed it by himself. Okay, but back to it. I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience, end quote. Based on my own research, I believe that CAD, this is the federal, this is the FBI agent saying that based on his research, he believes CAD refers to computer aided design. The Fed's letter also stated, P.S. You can check serial numbers to verify this is all self funded, my own ATM withdrawals. Let me read that again. The Fed's letter that the government said it recovered from Mangione stated, quote, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience, unquote. Fairly trivial? Maybe if you're as bright as Luigi Mangione, maybe it is trivial. So, based on all of the above, the complaint says, including the photographs of the shooter who the feds claim to be Mangione and the arrest photographs, they respectfully submitted to the complaint. They respectfully submitted the complaint. So what do you all think? Do you all think that Luigi Mangione is a hero? I've made it clear that I don't believe that you can shoot a man in the back because of your hatred for corporations, private insurance corporations in particular, and be a hero. Because United Healthcare has not skipped a beat. And we're talking about 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, and we're not talking about healthcare right now. Or do you think that Luigi Mangione, and I did suggest this, when I look at photos of him at his pretrial conference, do you think that Luigi Mangione is enjoying his newfound infamy? There are people wearing Luigi costumes in support of Luigi Mangione, Luigi from the Mario and Luigi game. And no matter how we feel about United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, he was CEO for 4 years. Did he engineer the healthcare system in this country? Did he deserve to be shot multiple times shot in the back? What did Luigi Mangione solve? He didn't bring attention to people's gripes with the healthcare system in this country. Like I said, it's been a political issue for years. And no one's talking about healthcare. Everyone is talking about Luigi Mangione. So he's facing a lot of time is if he's convicted of second degree murder in the state of New York. And he is facing the possibility of a death sentence handed out by the federal government. So hopefully, we, the public, will get to find out more of what is in that red notebook. I know that some law enforcement officials are already referring to it as a manifesto. I don't know if it's a manifesto. Well, I guess if it's expressing his opinions, his reasonings for doing what he did, then I guess it could be considered a manifesto. But there's nothing in the complaint where that says that Luigi Mangione says that he's going to shoot and kill an executive of United Healthcare. The notebook has entries that go back as far as August 15th. So there were only examples given in the complaint. And I am wondering what else is in that notebook. So hopefully YouTube does not take down this live because I showed the alleged murder weapon. And if you do come by this live, feel free to leave me a comment. I'd love to know what you think. Please refrain from using all caps. I do consider that yelling and screaming, and that's not called for. And the photo up now is Luigi Mangione being escorted back to New York City, or possibly his arrival in New York City. So, thanks for tuning in. And I think my next live, I'll probably be back in the state of Michigan with a case that has zero political implications. So, Luigi Mangione allegedly from around a quarter after 5 in the morning up until 7 a.m. carried out a plot that the federal government says was ongoing for months. Two counts of stalking. Let me get to the other two counts, or you can see them for yourself. Two counts of stalking, and of course, a count of murder. So, whatever your opinion, just keep it respectful. But I love to hear from the public, and I'd love to know what you all think. Oh, my computer's moving real slow, real slow, real slow. Okay, yeah, of course. Murder through use of a firearm, count three, and count four, the firearms offense, which the firearms offense and the stalking are the least of Mangione's worries at this point. So, thanks for whoever stopped in. And if you catch me on replay, do me a favor, hit the like button. It won't hit you back. Zell speaks, and I'll see you all later.